mean, did they own you or what?
Well, they only owned you if you allowed them to. If you asked for a favor, like some did, they owned you. If you didn't ask for the favor, they left you alone.
Have you ever wondered what became of Paul Anka, the voice behind timeless classics like Diana and Put Your Head on My Shoulder? Once adored by millions, his story today looks nothing like the glittering stages of his past. Fame, fortune, and friendships faded into something far more sobering at 84. But hidden beneath the sadness is a truth no fan expects. Do you dare uncover what really became of him? Stick around. This will shock you. The quiet life of a forgotten legend. At age 84, Paul Anka's life is very different from the glamorous stages that made him famous. His days are quieter, his routines are slower, and the noise of sold-out crowds is a thing of the past. The man who helped build the music business is now often forgotten by the people who work in it. He doesn't do interviews very often, and when he does, his words about getting old and not being important are said. Fame, which seemed like it would last forever, has ended, leaving him in a silence he didn't expect. Most people in the music business have moved on to new sounds and younger artists. Even though his songs have influenced many people, award shows and tribute performances rarely talk about his legacy. For younger people, his name is more of an afterthought than a main point. It reminds them of a time they never lived through. Paul feels very personally erased. It's like the society he helped shape has shut its doors on him. In his own words, he says that the world doesn't seem like the same place anymore. He has physically held on longer than most people thought he would. Years of hard work and a strong routine kept him busy well into his senior year, but getting older has still slowed him down. He used to work hard all the time, but now he is more careful because he knows his boundaries. His health is still important to him, even though years of working in studios, under the lights, and on tour buses have worn him down. No longer do I have the energy to record all night. Instead, I have quiet nights and steady rest. He sticks to the habits that made him famous, even though he is moving more slowly now. Fewer and more personal performances are the norm these days. They are driven by nostalgia rather than desire. Fans who remember him come to hear the voice that helped them grow up. Still, the crowds and stages aren't as big as they used to be when he was in charge. Every show is a sign of how much time has passed, but it's also proof that some connections with fans will never fully go away. For Paul, those times on stage are both sweet and sour. They taste like glory and show that things are going downhill. Rock Swings, an album he made in 2005, was his last big work of art. It was a remake of modern rock songs in his classic swing style. Critics liked how daring the idea was and saw it as proof of his skill as an artist and his ability to change. Even though the record got a lot of praise, it never really caught on with the public, so it's now a secret gem in his discography. That project was the last real spark of his creativity, showing everyone that he could still surprise them. Sadly, it never brought him back to the wider attention he had before. Since then, the quiet years have shown me something harsher: how quickly fame can fade. When he was at the top of his game, Paul was a worldwide star whose voice could be heard in many countries. People mostly remember him today. His songs are played at weddings and birthdays, but his name isn't often said. The business world doesn't call on him very often, and honors to him usually don't go beyond what he's done. One strange thing about music is that people never forget the songs, but they do forget the person who wrote them. Still, loss doesn't make up for all of his life. He will always have a strong bond with his son, Ethan. Unlike the applause that is dying down, this link gives him meaning and purpose in his later years. Charts and awards could never give Paul the kind of reputation that they give him. He thinks that family is the most important thing, and the only thing that can't change with time or fashion. He finds peace here, even though everyone else is looking somewhere else. The Ottawa Dreamer. Paul Anka's story begins in Ottawa, Canada, in a small but tightly woven Lebanese community that carries its traditions proudly. He lived with parents who had left Lebanon to start a new life. They taught their children to have faith, respect others, and work hard. That sense of stability shaped Paul's personality long before he became famous. The sounds of music, food, and laughter that were played at family events stuck with him. It was in this setting that his love of performance began. His dad ran a restaurant in downtown Ottawa that was also a place for people to get together. Entertainers would often come in and out of the room, bringing stories, songs, and energy with them. Paul, who was young at the time, would sit quietly and take it all in. He looked at how sounds could be heard across a room, how melodies moved, and how people felt during performances. The kitchen was his first school, where he learned how to be a showman and time his lines. For Paul, those nights were just as helpful as any training he had gone to school for. When Paul got home, he focused on making tools that would help him show how he felt. He learned to play the piano and guitar by ear because he didn't have a trained teacher to help him. He practiced for hours and hours to get better. He was set on making sounds that fit what he heard in his head. Once he found chords, songs started to come out on their own. He felt more sure of himself after working hard, and he realized he could make music instead of just listening to it. He got ideas from the big names of the time. Paul learned that a singer's voice could be more than just words from the way Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, and Patti Page sang. He learned that one note could tell a story, show feeling, and show who you are all at the same time. He spent hours and hours listening to music and analyzing every pause, lift, and breath. His voice sounded more grown up after those lessons, even though he was only a teenager. Paul wasn't just copying, he was also learning how songs are put together. His pen was a big difference between him and many of the other teen heroes who came after him. While other artists relied on songwriters to give them hits, Paul started writing songs in his notebooks when he was very young. He was as careful with words as he was with notes, shaping songs to have meaning. He had an edge because he wasn't just an entertainer. He could also make things. A young artist in the 1950s rarely had the power to write their own story, but he did because he knew how to do it. The church band also had a small but important impact on his discipline. He learned how to project, control himself, and respect the form of music by singing hymns. He learned there how voices could rise together to make a sound bigger than any one singer. He learned that his voice could stand out and fit in when needed while standing with other kids. Early on, the choir taught him how to work with others and keep a good tone, which became important skills in his job. Paul grew up in a not-so-glamorous neighborhood that made him feel safe and like he belonged. Folks from the same family knew each other and shared customs. As a child, he heard stories from immigrant parents who wanted better lives for their children, about how they had to sacrifice, keep going, and be strong. Being aware of that made him want to go beyond the quiet streets of Ottawa. He didn't just enjoy music for fun, he saw it as a way to connect with other people and the world. Another thing that showed us about Paul's early years was how serious he was for his age. While most kids his age were playing, he was thinking about what he was going to do. He would picture himself on stage, not only singing, but also making everyone pay attention. This drive showed that he wasn't just interested in music for fun. It was his drive that made him stand out. That way of thinking helped him last long after other teen heroes were no longer popular. In a way, his early stage training came from both working in his dad's kitchen and going to choir practice. The first place let him watch skilled entertainers, and the second taught him how to be disciplined and consistent. By combining the two, Paul became more sure that he could handle both traditional culture and modern show business. In the end, this dual impact would be one of his best qualities. He could honor his roots while also speaking to a wider range of people. Paul Anka's rise from a small-town dreamer to a global star showed that ability can change fate even when it seems impossible. The song that made the world stop. Paul Anka took a plane to Los Angeles to stay with his uncle when he was only 14. Paul had a notebook full of song lyrics and a dream of hearing them on the radio. Most kids his age were still busy with sports and chores. There were demo tapes lying around, and he went into radio stations without an appointment and knocked on doors. His determination wasn't perfect, but he never gave up. He was too young to give up, and not being afraid became his biggest strength. His drive caught the eye of Don Costa, an experienced arranger who saw potential in the boy's raw skills. Paul's first real chance came when Costa put him in touch with ABC Paramount Records. The weird song was put out by the label and had the strange title, Blow Wild Deverest Fontaine. The whole thing sank without a trace. But for Paul, that was the start of a new kind of discipline. For most teens, that would have been the end of the road. Paul didn't get angry when he failed. Instead, he saw it as practice. He looked into how melodies and words stuck with people, and why some songs were always playing in their heads. He worked hard to improve his time, sharpen his voice, and learn new words. He hung out with artists older than him for hours and watched them make sounds from scratch. But that failure made him grow up quickly, and it turned his sadness into training for something much bigger. Paul had a song ready to change his life by the time he was 16. He wrote Diana for a girl he liked. It was simple but powerful, and it was full of the honest feelings of a teenage desire. There was innocence in the words, but the music was stronger than his years. Teenagers are the only ones who can write songs like that, open, vulnerable, and eager to be heard. It shook the airwaves like lightning as soon as it hit them. Diana went viral all over the world, topping the charts and not letting go. For any artist, that's a huge number of books sold. For a boy who is just out of high school, that number is even more impressive. Paul stopped looking for opportunities overnight and started living in the middle of them. There were screaming fans outside of cinemas before he even got there because his name was in magazines. He didn't get famous slowly. It came at him like a wave. Paul was different from the new teen stars because he wrote his own songs. Ricky Nelson had the looks. Elvis Presley had the charm, but Paul had the pen. He was making his own voice, not just singing what other people told him to do. His songs didn't sound like they were written by someone older. Instead, they had the voice of someone his age. Teenagers could tell right away that his music was real because of that. His fame quickly grew thanks to hits like Lonely Boy, Puppy Love, and Put Your Head on My Shoulder. Each song showed a different side of youth, from being alone to being in love to being sad. There wasn't much to the songs, but that was the key. They felt like diary entries with music. His music was played at roller rinks, school dances, and in teens' homes all over the world. He was more than just a star. He was music. It was almost strange how different Paul's life was. During the day, he was a high school student who sat in class and wrote song lyrics in the margins of his papers. At night, he showed up to thousands of screaming fans and played for them. He brought textbooks to practice and studied for tests in the time between interviews. Few stars have ever had to do math homework while also being at the top of the charts. His early years were marked by the tension between being a normal kid and a pop star. One fact about Paul's fame that is often forgotten is how he became a new kind of star. One of the first teen heroes to show that being young could be a plus instead of a weakness. People who worked in record companies mostly saw teens as customers and not as makers. That idea was broken when Paul proved that a 16-year-old could write the hits. He not only became famous, but he also made it possible for other artists to follow in his footsteps. The master behind the curtain. Paul Anka didn't go away like most young stars of his time did when the screams of fans died down. Instead, he picked up a pen and found that making songs was even more powerful. This change wasn't just a backup, it was his real genius. Anka knew that timeless songs last longer than short-lived fame, unlike many of her peers who held desperately to the stage. That choice saved his career and turned him from a star on the decline into a hero in the background. It Doesn't Matter Anymore, which he wrote for Buddy Holly in 1958, was one of his first great songs. Even though the song was a bittersweet one in Holly's signature way, she died in a plane crash just a few weeks later. Anka didn't keep the royalties for herself. She gave them all to Holly's wife. That kindness shocked the business and showed that he cared about other artists. It showed that he cared more about leaving a memory than making money. That song wasn't just a hit, it was an important part of Holly's life. It was like a last gift for Holly's fans. Anka saw that he could write not only for himself, but also for other people, giving them a voice through his words. In a business where everyone is trying to sell themselves, it made him stand out. And that was just the start of his second act. His best-known song is She's a Lady, which he wrote for Tom Jones in 1971. The song went viral all over the world and became one of Jones's most famous themes. Jones's strong singing went well with the song's bold, driving energy. A lot of people don't know this, though, but Anka wrote it for himself first. He once again showed that he knew where a song belonged by giving it to Jones. He was one of a kind because he could step back and let other people shine. Anka did not hold on to ownership because she was proud. He wanted the song to be as good as it could be, even if someone else sang it. Because of this, he quietly built the success of other people. Every hit song he wrote made him more well-known as the man behind the music. Then he made Johnny's theme for The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, which was his most famous work. That happy tune was played every night for more than 30 years for millions of people across America. The song became an important part of culture, and people could recognize it from the first sounds. Still, not many of those millions of people knew it was written by Paul Anka. He was everywhere without being seen, which was both strange and strong. It's interesting that Anka accepted her secret fame. Some people might have wanted to be noticed, but he seemed happy knowing that his work was played every night in people's homes. His music was the setting for many memories, from laughs in the family living room to late-night ones. He was one of the most well-known musicians of his time because of this, and it solidified his place in show business long after he was a teen star. In a business that moved quickly past one-hit wonders, his ability to change kept him alive. Most young stars were eaten up and left behind in the 1960s. Anka did change lines, though, before the crash. He wasn't afraid to give up loud groups for contracts and sheet music. His desire to stay alive was as strong as ever, and so was his voice. For someone so young, he also had an odd business sense. At a time when many singers didn't really understand contracts, he focused on publishing rights, earnings, and long-term deals. Anka learned how the business worked, and then used what he learned to his advantage. Writing songs wasn't just a hobby, it was a way to make money. It also gave him power that most artists never got. One new idea that is often missed is how Anka quietly taught others through his songs. Younger performers and even well-known stars came to him for help. His knowledge of how to phrase, arrange, and make lyrics flow had an impact on more lives than most people know. Not only did he give out songs, but he also helped artists grow. In this way, his pen trained opinions other than his own. From Sinatra to Elvis, Paul Anka's writing helped make heroes, and his influence can be seen all over the golden age of music. Sinatra's shadow. Paul Anka looked up to Frank Sinatra as a child. He didn't see Sinatra as just another singer. He saw him as the best, with a voice that could carry feeling with style and power. As a youngster who wanted to be a singer, Anka saw Sinatra as the type of artist she wanted to become. Many stars faded over time, but Paul thought Sinatra would never be topped. Later, this respect would bring them together in ways no one saw coming. They ran into each other when Anka was still figuring out who he was. Sinatra saw more in Paul than just a young pop star, unlike other people. He saw a rare seriousness in his writing and a desire to make music that mattered. Because they respected each other, they became friends and stayed friends for decades. They became close through music, trust, and a shared idea of what it means to seek timeless things. Sinatra was about to make a choice in the late 1960s. He was having doubts about his job and even thought about quitting music. Around the same time, Paul heard a French song called Comme d'habitude. The melody was creepy, but English-speaking audiences didn't connect with the words. Even though other people didn't see it, Paul did, and in that vision, he saw the right chance to repay his hero. Anka didn't just adapt the song, he changed everything about it. He came up with new words that reflected Sinatra's journey, including the hard times, the victories, the defiance, and the joy. Each line was written with Sinatra in mind. Paul didn't just write songs, he wrote about Sinatra's life as a man and an artist. It seemed like Sinatra had always had that song when he sang it. That song turned into My Way. Sinatra made it into an anthem that shaped his success in the latter part of his life. It showed who he was, living his life his way, enjoying wins, and taking responsibility for mistakes. A lot of people associated Sinatra with this song. It became as much a part of his legacy as his singing. That moment could not have been so important without Paul Anka. Paul was most proud of his work on My Way. Even though he had his own #1 hits, he thought this song was more important than his own fame. It wasn't about the attention, it was about making a difference and knowing that he had done something meaningful for the world. Anka himself said that My Way was his best work. He and Sinatra both died, but the gift lives on through generations. Paul still got moved when he sang the song. When he sang it live, he often dedicated it to Sinatra, to remind people of the close relationship the two had. The song wasn't just music, it was a promise of friendship written in tune. Paul felt like he was reliving the moment he played the piece of music that made his hero who he was. Even after Sinatra died many years ago, the feelings never went away. Many people, not just Sinatra, were affected by My Way. A lot of people around the world used it as a song of strength, pride, and self-reflection. Sinatra's voice was often heard saying those words at weddings, deaths, retirements, and other important events in people's lives. But behind the scenes of that hit song was Paul Anka, the writer who made it sound so great. He took a French song and made it a timeless part of culture around the world. Here's the deeper thought. Sinatra might not have had that late career comeback without Paul. By the end of the 1960s, Sinatra needed a song that would leave a lasting impression of who he was. Paul gave it to Sinatra at the right time, making it not only a hit, but also a mark that will last forever. Anka was a big part of setting up Sinatra's ongoing myth in many ways. That's probably one of the most important things an artist can do. Broken at home, fame often looks glamorous, but it rarely shows the quiet damage done behind closed doors. For Paul Anka, the applause of millions couldn't drown out the silence of a strained home. His marriage to fashion model Anne de Zogheb seemed like a fairy tale at first. They had 5 beautiful daughters and shared 37 years together, building a life that many believed was unshakable. But the pressure of constant travel, endless performances, and Paul's absence began to eat away at the foundation. Anne carried much of the weight at home, raising their daughters while Paul lived on the road. The strain eventually created distance between them, and by 2000, their long marriage ended in divorce. For Paul, it was a devastating blow, not just because of the years invested, but because he knew fame had played its part in tearing them apart. Despite the split, he remained close to his daughters, making sure they never felt abandoned. Still, the fracture left him with a sense of failure he could never completely shake. After that, Paul tried to rebuild love with a second marriage to Anna Öberg, a Swedish model and actress. Unlike his first marriage, this relationship was stormy almost from the start. The union brought him a son, Ethan, but it also brought public disputes and bitter arguments that spilled into the courts. By the time their divorce was finalized, Paul was once again facing the emptiness of a broken home. But this time, he was determined not to lose his son in the aftermath. The custody battle over Ethan became one of the most important fights of his life. In 2017, Paul achieved something rare in Hollywood. He won sole custody of his son. Courts rarely grant fathers full custody, especially celebrity fathers, but Paul proved his dedication and stability as a parent. To him, it wasn't just a legal victory, it was a deeply personal triumph. Ethan became the anchor he desperately needed, giving Paul a new reason to stay grounded after years of chaos. Other relationships followed, but none lasted long enough to bring real healing. Many of them were brief, fiery, and often ended with the same sense of exhaustion. Fame had given Paul everything: wealth, recognition, and a career that lasted decades, but it left scars on his ability to trust and be trusted in return. He was no longer just battling time and age, but also the emotional weight of failed loves. Behind the stage lights, Paul was a man searching for peace that never came easily. What most people don't know is how deeply these struggles shaped his music. Some of his later performances carried a raw edge, as though he was singing more to himself than to the crowd. Fans who paid close attention noticed this shift, sensing the man behind the legend was telling his own story of heartbreak. It wasn't only the lyrics that told the tale, it was the way his voice would sometimes crack, as if revealing pain that couldn't be hidden. Fame took his privacy, but it also turned his personal losses into part of his public art. Today, Paul speaks often of Ethan, crediting his son as the one constant in a life filled with turbulence. While the world still sees him as the polished star of classic hits, at home, he is just a father trying to do right. That role became his redemption after years of broken promises and failed relationships. The bond between father and son gave him something money or fame could never buy: stability. And in a life where applause faded and marriages crumbled, that became his truest success. Paul Anka's story today is not about glory, but survival, navigating old age in a world that moved past him. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video popping up on your screen for more amazing content.